Ladies and gentlemen, thank you, Robin, for inviting me, and this is my second appearance in this conference. First was talking about something that we've developed in Sierra Leone in terms of storable energy, but my main day job, as you've heard, is in the film business, and during the last conference at Windsor, talk turned to whether in fact all of the erudite conversations and talks that we'd all had, could it be turned into something that the general public could understand and react to? Were we just talking to each other in a closed room, and when we went home, nothing happened? So this is a slightly lighter type of look at the problems of rescuing the planet. Cinema, and for that there's television and the new technologies in terms of how we see things, is one of the primary ways we learn about the world. I mean, not just more educated people, but just people around the world learn a lot from going to the cinema or watching television. It engages our senses, it can educate us, it can shock us, it can make us laugh. On a sad note, we've been killing off the planet in the cinema, one way or another, for years. You probably all remember Mad Max, which introduced us to Mel Gibson, a post-apocalyptic film where the greatest treasure was a container of fuel. Roland Emmerich, a fantastic German director, gave us The Day After Tomorrow, which was probably nearer what we've all been talking about, where a form of global warming destroys us. Wall-E, if we remember it, with the cute robot that was just cleaning up this planet after we had ruined it, and it was just an enormous garbage planet. And then there are other films, such as Outbreak, where a killer virus potentially took us out. If I look at some of the films I've made, I was thinking about it on the way here. Nostradamus, a wonderful sage, and if people don't know that, he was addicted to nutmeg, which actually gave him the sorts of dreams that he wrote down. In his writings and in our film, he saw the end of the world as a huge, overpopulated, unsustainable edifice that crumbled in his dreams. So, in the film business, the world ends for probably two reasons. One is just bad luck. Something hits us, such as deep impact. An asteroid floating around out there, probably 1 kilometer wide, whacks into this planet, and just like the dinosaurs, we will be curtains. 28 days later, a British film looked at another viral attack where a guy wakes up from an operation in hospital to find out that most of London has disappeared. The other is our own created existential risk, global warming, pollution, far too many people, genetic engineering, which we have no idea about. It goes on. Those sorts of films were represented by Waterworld. In fact, a very underrated film about global warming where the entire planet is flooded and Kevin Costner sails around it looking for fresh water and somewhere to land. And of course we've got the jet-setting senator Al Gore with his Inconvenient Truth. But all of these films suffer from something that we discussed at Windsor, which is our own egocentric belief in our own salvation. These films always have one or two people who we identify with who survive, and it's just the other people who we don't identify with who go down with the ship. It's the old adage of the bomber crews who always thought someone else would buy it. It's why old people don't wake up screaming, because someone else is going to die before they do. So we have a problem in actually making films where it is a total disaster. Perhaps the only big stories about total disasters or sacrifice comes to us from religion. Only God gives us the real sacrifice, and only God says that after this sacrifice, he will sort things out, we will come back, he'd have cleaned up the planet, and we will inherit the kingdom of earth, whether it's in the Christian religion or the other great religions that this planet believes in. So we've got the three things. We've got somebody's going to whack us, we're going to do it ourselves, or there is a salvation through God. And that's really where we've got to. We are egocentric Homo sapiens. We forget our chums from the past. Poor old Homo erectus. He's been around much longer than we have, but he's disappeared. The Neanderthals, our close cousins, probably last seen in Bognor Regis, but we killed them. There was a wonderful film, Quest for Fire, where a Neanderthal chats up a human because she can laugh and he doesn't quite see what she's laughing about, which was obvious to us. So what can we do if we wanted to make a film? If we wanted to send Robin Russell Jones out with a tin box to try and raise some money, what would we try and make that would rescue the planet? Do we think there's any hope? Have we actually reached a tipping point? Is the film that we're going to make so down that we're not going to possibly watch it? We could make a viral film. We could make a 1984 film where, in fact, what you hear around in this conference is that government will tell us what to do. Only government can give us a 1984 style world where we are compelled to keep it tidy and fresh. But we don't want that because we don't like that. We want to go around and drive around and, eat lots of food and, have a good time. Maybe there's a world in which we could take people back to nature. In a tiny little way, my wife runs a woodland course south of London where fathers and sons, mothers and daughters are encouraged to come and see what it might be like if you just had to live in a forest. What can you eat? Well, nettle soup, a dead rabbit, and a few boiled bulrushes. You can probably survive on it, but it's not fun. But at least people see what the danger is outside. Maybe we do need to really shock people. I remember when I first saw the films of the concentration camps and realized, as millions of people did, that this thing had happened in our lifetime. Those films shocked us, and today we have the legal edifice to try and stop that happening again. So maybe what we could do is to make a small viral film. What's our most precious commodity? And I think our most precious commodity is the children that will come to replace us. So maybe we could just take families going down to a beach with their children. Caucasian children, Chinese children, black children, children from all over the place. And these families are as wasteful as all the families are here, using far too much oil, dropping far too much litter, eating far too much food, and having far too many children. And they take one of these children and tie them to a pole on the beach. All the little kids, all our future, tied to a pole on the beach as the tide comes in. Maybe it's just the tide, or maybe it's global warming. And I think that as those little children start to suffocate because the water is getting up to their noses, their mouths, etc., I think we have to give people a simple message. You wouldn't do it to a child, and you shouldn't do it to the planet. And maybe there's just an end scene, because there is no happy ending. Maybe there's just a few animals left on the planet waiting for the next idiot animal to go and ruin it for the next idiot animals, which sadly are us. So I would make a pretty hard-hitting film. What could we do with it? Well, we could put it at the beginning of lots of films, give it to people. Just run a tiny short film. I think the studios would like to do that. They like to give things back. And so maybe, everybody here can start to think about what sort of film we should make. I don't think it should be more than a few minutes long. People have very little concentration these days. But let's make a film and bung it at the start of lots of films. The BBC would probably do it, ITV, the studios, and we could have a film which actually really awoke people to the wonderful amount of common sense, engineering skill and so forth that is talked about today. So I thought I'd just close perhaps by asking anybody here if they had, in 5 seconds, an idea for a film that we possibly could make to illustrate the way that, with Robin's help, we're going to rescue the planet. Thank you. No, it's not. People hate telling ideas.
One with a happy ending. One with a happy ending.
All catastrophe films have a happy ending. That's the problem with them. Because you go out of the cinema thinking, yes, we've lost X billion people, but those 5 people who we've identified with, Jake Gyllenhaal and his sister, they'll be fine. And that's the problem. That's true. There are films that have devastatingly sad endings, but most catastrophe films have happy endings.
Yeah, I mean, I get where you're coming from, and I mean that would get the message over as to what the likely outcome is going to be if we do nothing. But I'd also like to get over the message that there is a fantastic amount that can be done, and it's just waiting there to be done, and it's just political inertia that's stopping it. So somehow you've got to frighten people, but you've also got to show people the solution within 5 minutes. And that's a challenge. That would need a good film producer.
I think the problem is that there are, what you have here, through the first day, second day, third day, and so forth, is that there is so much information about what you could do, which is available. But you've got to frighten people to go and find it for themselves. I think, Harry Cohn, who ran Paramount Pictures, when, if I want to send a message, I'll use the telegraph service. I'm in the movie business. So I think that movies are very, very simple points. And I think you can scare people into going to find out about the solution, if that's an answer to your question. I think it's too difficult to educate them. I think you can scare them into, people aren't idiots. They know what they need to do. They just need to be scared into doing it.
I think there's an easier way. Well, I think there's an easier way. Firstly, if we're trying to get to the masses, I don't think you scare them with a scientific film or a film with a integral plot. We should introduce into our soaps that everybody watches, into programs that are current and on each week, this concept. And also we should introduce it in a scientific way, but at the same time a light-hearted way. And this is what I was discussing with you over at lunch. I have a concept, but I'm not giving it to you now.
So there. I mean, I think we do. I mean, I'm a great avid fan of the Archers. I've listened to the Archers all my life. I actually did a play of the Archers. And the Archers have an agricultural correspondent you know, that's what the Archers was about. It was a post-war method of explaining how we're going to grow food and not rely on American imports. The difficulty was that it didn't totally work, because we're much more interested in whether Shula's going to have an affair with Dan and Doris is having, you know, it gets subsumed in the gut life that is human beings. And I think that, you know, it would be difficult to have, you know, bottle sorting at the Old Vic in EastEnders. It's just difficult. I think you need to, I don't mean to scare people, but you need to tickle their imagination. This is not a horror film, it's just an awakening film. If we have got global warming, then let's show people drowning, let's show children, that's what we're doing to them. You know, not literally, but a little bit.
If you were going to follow that kind of concept, the way I'd like to see it if I was a viewer, if it was just a short trailer, the bit that you said where perhaps something bad could happen to the child, but on the other side of the coin, you have to have some kind of decision making so that you've got somebody who's going to take choice A or B, and choice A is what they do now, which would possibly have a bad impact on that child because they might get submerged. But if they pick the other option, which might be futuristic but is actually available, it's just not in widespread use yet, so whatever energy saving device or alternative energy, if the person in this in the story, not the child, but in the background decides to choose option B, the new option, then the tide will go down and the child will have a bit longer. You know, the other side of the imagery, not just the negative. So each time someone makes that energy saving decision, the water level will go down a little. And if enough people make that decision, the problem will start to reduce.
I quite agree. You know, one always has to have the survivors. But I think that, you know, if you are going to just have a very simple message, I remember we had a television commercials business, and we made one of the more dreadful films about speeding, when a young child runs out in front of a car and is knocked over, and the mother, and it's just a dreadful piece of public information filming. And I remember I was on a driver awareness course, you know, because I'd opted that, didn't want any points on my license, and I was dozing at the back, and they showed my film. And the policeman obviously taken total dislike to me because I was doodling and not paying attention. And he said, you were doing 50 miles an hour in a 30-mile-an-hour limit, and look what happens. What have you got to say to that? And I said, look, at 50 miles an hour, I'd have missed the child. And there was a round of applause. It's a very odd thing about how we try and show people, you know, horrid events. And I think that, you know, if you had lots of people, the reason I had this is that the came up with this idea was that when I was at school, we had a Nigerian guy who was our centre forward. I don't know play any sport, but he was fantastic. He was called Akufo Addo, and he ran around. He was fantastic. He scored goals. And years later, in my 20s, I'd left, and there was this ghastly picture on the front of the Daily Telegraph of a whole bunch of Nigerian leaders on breakwaters, all had been shot in the head, and poor old Akufo was one of them. I thought, my godfathers. You know, it made a lot of people think, and I think, you know, the idea of taking children down to what is obviously an encroaching sea, and it just shows us to be careless. We're careless with this planet. We're not criminally stupid, but we're just careless. And if we're careless, children will die.
There is a advertisement at the moment which is on these lines, which you've probably seen. It's advertising the wisdom of having a stop loss when you're a financial trader. And it shows an old lady in a Morris Minor backing up across a little white line, which goes to the opposite of the stop line, at the edge of a cliff. And of course she doesn't stop, and very slowly, inevitably, the little cow, the little lady, rolls over the cliff and disappears. And she dies, obviously. It's done in such a way that it's slightly humorous, but at the same time it is rather horrifying, and it certainly brings up the idea of having a mark to stop at and sticking to it. So it struck me that it is quite like your idea, and that you picked on the same point, the dramatization of an event, which is in itself, of course, not the event we're talking about, which is symbolic of it, to emphasize the underlying proposition. So I haven't got a good idea at all, but I commend, if you haven't seen it, that advertisement as a starting point for the development of your excellent idea.
The secret of the film business, and I appreciate that, is don't bother to think up a new idea, just copy somebody else's.
Or adapt it.
Or adapt it.
That's what Hollywood does, isn't it?
Of course it does. Plagiarism.
I've not got an idea for the film necessarily, but just to say there's a very recent case study for a viral. Getting any kind of media or clip to go viral is extremely difficult. There's lots of corporations have tried to make it happen. But there is an example of a campaign which has gone viral, which is the Coney campaign. And I don't know if other people here have seen it, but I was forced to watch it by my 14-year-old. I dare say other people have had the same kind of experience. So just to say there's an example there of a viral. I'm studying a Coney, a campaigning viral. What are the attributes of Coney which made it such a success is the kind of thing that we have to learn from if we want a film to have a non-theatrical distribution or to have a normal internet, if I can call it normal, experience rather than the broadcast experience.
Yes, I mean, you know, we did some viral campaigns. I think the best one we ever did was those wonderful false legs that people wear to run in, you know, when they have lost their limbs. And we did this for a pizza company. So pizzas were being delivered at breakneck speed by these people with these metal legs. And of course they could jump over things, they run incredibly quickly. And the guys have delivered all their pizzas and they all go back to the pizza place where they start from, and they're all there and they all jump up in the air because they've been so successful and unaware that there's a fan and it just takes all their heads off. And people love this. You know, so I think...
What was the message?
You think before you jump. Which is probably what this little old lady should have done. By the way, my wife and I gave her mother a car, and we were waiting for her at in Mallorca at the seaside when this little car came on. We waved, she waved back to us and drove straight into the bay. And we did, if only I'd been filming it. By the way, she survived. Swam to the surface. No, I mean, I like to think of, you know, I've been around in the film business and I've seen, you know, so many things that people have tried. And I do think that images, the concentration camps is a terrifying image, but when those images were shown to people, it just, well, in fact, I did my law thesis on the Nuremberg trials, and the Americans had filmed all their concentration camp footage in colour. But it looked so nice because they'd got the prisoners to do the roses and so forth. They actually had to show it in black and white so that it looked as terrible as it really was. But I think that, you know, children are our planet, they're our future. We're going to live on this planet, I for less time than children. But I think that, you know, to put children and the planet together, we look after our children. Thank God most parents love and look and succor their children, and I think that if you put that analogy with the planet, it just starts to put something together. And it's very, very simple. It has to be simple. You know, I think Robin is right. You've got to try and explain all the different ways of doing it, but we're very lucky the speakers here are experts in their field and so forth. We've got to get people to search that out for themselves and just, you know, liken the planet that we are very privileged to live on, you know, has to be protected. And what do we protect? Well, we protect young people. So I think that's a good analogy. But listen, there's tons of other ones. It'd be cheap to do, by the way. That's always a good consideration.
Well,
Well, listen, thank you.